volunteered to go on this flight, knowing full well that they were going to die, right? Because they kept the end in mind. They knew that eventually that they would get there, right? This is like our naming conventions to me are so important. I swear it saved my life one time. It was the only thing that kept me sane was remembering who I am and remembering that I'm part of this chain of humans that extends back and extends into the future as well, you know? So that's like the idea in the science fiction stories, that like because of our cultural values, it made us the perfect people to board this ship, knowing full well that not only are you making this choice for yourself, but for the next generations that are going to live and die on this ship. But you're making that decision for them, saying that like, now you're going to live and die on the ship, but it's so that this person gets there.
Yeah.
Because eventually we are going to get there, and it won't be you. And this might be what happens with us, you know. Like there might be a point in our history where it's our kids that have like realized and actualized like what a future human world looks like, and we won't see it, right? But it doesn't matter if we see it.
Yeah.
Because we will.
Eventually.
Yeah. You know, like I am Mala, and all the iterations of it are contained within me, and all future iterations are contained within me. You know, and I feel that, like I said, when I was about ready to lose my mind, it was the only thing that was like holding me in place was like remembering this and remembering that this is who I am, and that I could make it through all the things that I was going through. You know. Yeah, I mean, I kind of don't. The only reason why I don't like telling the story is just because people take it badly, right? But like this is a story that was relayed to me about when people first came to Alaska, right? And it was one of the Yupik communities, and that they were asking what was like one of this is like early contact, right? And they were asking like, what's wrong with these people? And they were referring to white people. And he said that the elders said that you need to be patient with them because they haven't grown up yet, you know? And I kind of think there's some truth to that, you know? And I'm not talking about like Western history, right? Like when I talk to like modern white people, you know, and this is probably kind of a mean thing for me to say, you know, but like since I studied Western philosophy and Western history, you know, I told them, like, look, I've read your elders, you know? Your elders are Plato, your elders are Aristotle, your elders are these people, right? And they are wise. There's a lot of good shit in Western philosophy and Western history and Western culture, right? But what I said is that I don't see any of that in you.
Can you blame them?
No.
Right?
No. If like, I mean, look, if we were born, like,
them?
If we were born them, you know what I mean? Like, we wouldn't be different. Right, and I think that's important to not forget, right? You know, and because this isn't a blame game, this isn't like a us versus them, right? Like even within, you think about the way that I defined it, you know, whiteness, it's not a color, it's a culture, right? And I think that this is actually one of the things that white people are feeling right now, is that their culture's dying, but they don't know what it is, and so you can't save something that you don't know what it is, right? Like you can't articulate it. What are you going to save? You're grasping at straws. You know, classical music? Is that what you're going to say? You know, like, but what is it, right? You know, and I think that people know what culture is, but they can't articulate it, right?
I had an interview for something called the Space Radio with this guy named Dr. Livingston, and he wanted to talk to me about this presentation that I did. He was asking about, like, how Native people can live in such like isolated communities and in the dark and irregular days, and the only answer that I had to that was a relationship with the environment. You need to know, like you need to figure it out. Like there's a way to figure out your environment enough that you know what's going to happen or how this reacts to this, or you know if a storm is coming, right? And a relationship with the animals around you. Right? Yeah. There's such a connection with that. And that's like so paramount to who we are as people. And that you don't look at this landscape and think that it's never been touched or you're the only one out here or whatever. It's a very spiritual connection to the people that have lived there for thousands of years. And so there's like this innate connection to each other, to your past and your present, your future, and everything. And so like it's this whole worldview. And I couldn't articulate it to him. You know, he was like, well, if we're living in space, then, we can't go outside. I'm like, we have to. As people, we have to leave this station. You can't stay in the station for so long. You need to go out and find out, what's different about, what's out there. I don't know, the stars. Look at something. There needs to be a relationship with your environment in order to survive. They couldn't grasp that at all. And I couldn't articulate it because I don't know how to explain that to someone who dismisses it like that. He's like, well, you can't go outside. Yeah. I'm like, you have to. Yeah. Even if it's super cold in, the Arctic, you can't stay inside. There's no way that you can just stay inside and do nothing and drive yourself crazy. You need to go outside. Find something to do. Yeah. You can definitely tell when people just don't get you. This is kind of part of the reason why I'm doing this, right? Like the most important reason is for us, right? And the things that I'm doing, who's our Plato? Who's our Aristotle, right? And we have them. Right, in Oscar Quagley, he's done a lot of work in terms of talking about what our cultures are, doing some work and articulating exactly what those are and what that difference is, right? It's but we do have them, right? We just don't know their name. We just never name them. Yeah, well, and because we do come from an oral culture, which again I think is another super important thing. I really believe in the oral tradition, right? If I remember right, Socrates. There's no writings of Socrates, right? This is Plato's mentor, right? Plato, the father of Western civilization, right? Yeah. He wrote the Republic, and Socrates was his master, and Socrates didn't believe that things should be written down. I see, right? Because what are the problems with writing stuff down, right? The meanings of words change over time. Right? And this is the problem that we have in translating ancient texts, is that some of the words don't mean the same things, and some of them we don't even know what they mean. There's no context for it anymore. Exactly. Right? And the second part of it is that you can be misunderstood, right? You can be misinterpreted. Even as careful as you want to be, you can be misinterpreted, right? This is actually what happened with Nietzsche and the Nazis. Nietzsche hated the Nazis, right? But the Nazis took his philosophy. Because it was easy. The way that Nietzsche wrote, he wrote in aphorisms, right? So short little, kind of almost one paragraph thoughts that could be taken completely out of context, and they were good by themselves. But if you really want to understand the guy, you can't just take single aphorisms. You got to look at his entire work and understand the picture that he's painting, right? And he did not like Germans. But so there's problems with writing stuff down, right? And I really believe that the best way to transmit knowledge is person to person, generation to generation. If something's important enough to remember, then remember it. I think that writing is perfectly fine for technical manuals and shit, But I don't know, concept. Well, I don't know. I read these big, long Western philosophy books, right? And I'm going geez, this guy just took 1,000 pages, and I could have done it in 20, And I do think that there's, especially when you're trying to explain something new to somebody, to use a lot of examples and to explain it over and over again until they get it, I think is important, right? But it's also one of the things about Northern philosophy is I attempt to be succinct, at least in the ideas and the writing, if not in the telling of it, right? Because I'm a verbose person naturally. But try to make the ideas as succinct as possible, because Northern philosophy aspires to be super pragmatic, right? This is not about arguing about what words mean. This is about getting to the nature of truth and reality. What is going on here? These are the big questions that philosophy has always been asking, and none of them are answered yet. None of them. One of the first things that I looked at other than culture was time, right? Because time itself is a really important aspect of Western culture. The number one most used noun in the English language is time, right? And think about all the different ways that we use it and how much it kind of dictates our lives and the way that we do things. And so when I was doing the Alaska Native dialogues on racial equity, I was down in Hooper Bay, and there was this white teacher there, and she was lecturing me, and she was telling me her ancestor story about, I think I told you this already, right, about the Cherokee princess. Oh, yeah. That her assertion was that the greatest gift that the white people ever brought our people was the concept of time. But I also get it, right? Are we super punctual people? Are we real kind of laid back and just kind of, right? Yeah. It's not about time. It's about quality. Yeah.
right? And our view of the indigenous, specifically like the Inuit view of time, was very different than the Western view of time, right? It's like the way that I would characterize it is that like there's just the ever-present now, right? That's the only thing that can be really like kind of said to exist, right? Like the past doesn't exist independently. This is not a place that you can travel to. This is events that have already occurred in this reality, and the future is just future probable events, right? Like these things don't exist independently. There's no block time, right? But people were dualists. We believed in the difference between the spirit and the body, and there's these ideas that, and it's huge, right? Every single piece, like the aspects of philosophy, like was like epistemology, ethics, and things like that, right? Aesthetics, right? Like what can be said to be beautiful, right? Like what is beautiful? Phenotypically, Alaska Natives look very different, and like I think this is one of the things that we struggle with, like who and what defines what is beautiful, right? Like do we see beauty in hunting? Like I wrote a poem about it because to me it's this deeply spiritual, beautiful thing, whereas somebody from PETA doesn't see it the same way. And again, like the ethics one, I think is a good one, right? Because then you get into like whether or not is it okay to kill an animal, right? Like mercy killing, which was part of our culture, right? Is that okay? Yeah, it is a complicated thing. Just this summer my mom died, and I made the choice to pull the plug on her. This was like, and it was not easy because it was, and it really was a question of quality of life, right? So my mom had multiple strokes, and this last one, she was awake, but she couldn't eat. She couldn't even drink water. She couldn't get out of bed, and the doctors told me that, like, hey, we can keep her alive, but it's the question of, like, do you think that this is the kind of quality of life that she wants? And I already knew the answer, right? But I didn't want to give the answer because it felt like I was killing my mom. You know what I mean? And I kind of did. She'd be alive right now, probably, if I didn't make that choice. And it's not like I was the only one. Like, me and my dad made the choice together, but it was more like I made the choice and my dad grudgingly went along with it.
Well, here's the thing I too think is like if you're gonna have the power as a doctor to extend life, what kind of consequences are you taking on then? Right. Nobody thought about that then.
Well, yeah, and because if you extended my mom's life, then that would mean that we would have to take care of her in a way that we never had to before, and that she wouldn't be happy either. So there was consequences, right? And I didn't want to let her go, but it was the right choice and it was the right thing to do, And, your point, I think it's such a good one, that there are consequences to extending life, too, and that those should also be taken into account. Some cultures, right, like they always joke about that, right, like you save somebody's life and you become responsible for it, right? And it's like, well, to some degree, if you save their life, you are responsible for them continuing, It's like, so you save him.
It's like when you bail someone out of jail, and like you have to be
now
responsible.
That's right.
And then to go to court,
yikes. Yeah.
So far, we've touched on culture, competing narratives, the influence the environment has on the people of the North, a little on the concept of time, and a little on ethics. The live discussion with Warren lasted several hours, so I had to break it up into 2 episodes. Next episode, and the continued conversation with Warren, we get into traditions, awareness, yuyirak, cultural evolution, the traditional men's house, and religion. Koyanakbak to our Coffee and Quaq Patreon supporters, Tiffany Creed, Shannon Hawkins, Jessica Smith, Heather Dingman, Emily Kwan, Delula Erickson, Crude Magazine, AK, and my own mom, Arlene Iqalin Glenn. You all are the patak to our bones, the berries to our akutuk, and the zing to our mikiyap. I'm Alice Kanniklen, over and out.